Oh, masking fluid. Most watercolorists have a love-hate relationship with the little rubbery substance. I'm no exception, but you know, there are some things that you just can't do without mask. We're going to work on a painting today and try to get some wonderful light effects, and I'm going to show you my favorite mask. It's not too bad, actually. You know, buddy, that's one thing I really appreciate about you is you are completely unmasked. Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, I think aside from great trees in landscape, really interesting trees, the other thing I love to do most with landscape is great light. Interesting light play off of items. You can get some really neat effects on trees, especially these big ancient kind of oak tree looking things. Yep, I'm going to mask this baby off, and I have included a link to this mask. This is part of the recipe for getting some really great light effects. I need to be able to paint right over these trees to get the background effects that I want, the washy, dark tones without having to paint around things. And I want to have these very fine branches coming off of this large tree. Just a word about this mask. It's Schminke. It's the mask that I prefer now. It's non-latex and it does not smell. And it's not that rubbery stuff that has a shelf life, you know, like that of a housefly. It's resin based, and that's the reason why. And that just makes it very special. I reviewed this a couple years ago, and I said then that it was a game changer. I'll put the link to that review if you want to see a fuller review. And it was. It's easier to use in your brush, easier to clean out of your brush. You don't have to ruin your brush. You don't have to pre-soap your brush. So those are all pluses. I don't recommend that you let it dry in your brush. You keep your brush wet, but use it as though you're painting with acrylic paint. That's kind of the way it works. So I'm painting in these backgrounds. Now you saw me actually squeeze out the paint fresh. Yeah, that was because these are going to be very dark background washes. And I wanted to start with fresh paint that wasn't a dried pan. I could have used dried pans. It would have been fine. But this allows me to get a bigger brush in there. It's just a little ceramic palette. Allows me to load up a bigger brush than small pans do. It allows me to get to deep, dark, saturated color quicker because the paint is fresh out of the tube. So that's the only reason I did it. But I could have used the pans. I have done. So this is where the light comes into play. And this is what I was after, and that starts with a dark background behind your subject. Now, you'll also probably find it interesting that I'm only using 4 colors here. And so that's sort of a side theme is, you know, I talked in an episode a little ways back about using limited palettes and how important that was. And this is probably a great episode for just showing you what can be done with a few colors. These 4 colors just shined, I thought. It gave me everything I wanted and everything I needed. And the fact that it was 4 colors, there was some complementary in there. There was some analogous color in there. And it was just a great combination. It gave me a very harmonious look when I was done. And that I'm really happy for. And let me just mention the colors real quickly. These are Maimeriblu colors. Dragon's Blood, Indigo, Phthalo Turquoise, and Yellow Ochre. And the whole painting was done with only those 4 colors. So I'm removing the mask. So I use a rubber cement pickup, just exactly the way you might with latex mask. You can also roll it off with your finger. a little harder to do. It doesn't peel up like in a long, stretchy, rubbery film the way latex does, but it comes off in sort of a eraser crumb fashion, I guess you might say. All right, so what I'm doing here is just kind of giving myself a little bit of a roadmap using a dark sepia watercolor pencil. None of these details will probably be seen in the final painting. It just gives me a little more of the dimensional aspects and features that I will need to do the final painting. And then what I'm doing is coming in and softening some of where the roots meet the ground, just to give it a little bit more integration into the ground. And that is a bristle brush like you might use for oils or acrylics. So it's a sort of a scrubber, I guess you could say. But here we go. From this point on, it's just a series of washes, as is every watercolor. And as I go, I will be paying a lot of attention to where the light is coming from, and that's to my left or to the left of the screen. And I want a sun effect, like light breaking through the trees, and it is illuminated this lower part of the tree trunk and the ground surrounding it. That was what I wanted. I didn't want just a standing tree. So all I'm doing here are the first washes, which just give the tree some basic dimension, I guess you might say. You know, just where it rolls and dips, that sort of thing. The colors I'm using here for the tree are Indigo and Dragon's Blood. And they mix to give you sort of a gray, and you can bend the gray back and forth between cool or warm. And occasionally I'll stick in some yellow ochre. But it's a very effective palette, these four colors, just for achieving a number of different types of grays. The Phthalo Turquoise, which I didn't use a lot of, you'll see it in the background. It really cooled off and pushed that background back, but it also mixes with the yellow ochre for a nice green. So there's that. Just really a surprising amount of things you can do with this color selection. Trees. What is it about trees? I love them. So much you can do with them, so much character, especially, you know, when you single out and do a tree portrait. I think that's the thing I love to do the most with trees. So the starkness of these thin branches, and by the way, I would have had a really hard time masking off those really fine branches with latex mask. Maybe if I'd have had a fresh bottle, you know, who wants to buy a fresh bottle of mask every time you do a new painting? I mean, sometimes that's about the way the shelf life is on that stuff. But it gets gloppy, thick pretty quick. You can thin it out a little. You're not supposed to thin out latex mask. The resin-based mask here, the Schminke, you can thin out more like paint, and it masks and comes out fine. Doesn't stay in the paper. Anyway, those thin branches I just easily painted with this mask. But back to what I was doing, and that is sort of cutting back on the stark white nature of some of them. I end up, and the only place I used any gouache at all is I ended up going back and reclaiming some of the white on those branches to the right. Because I think I went a little too far in washing over them. Mainly what I wanted to do is sort of make a shadow line under those branches. And right there you can see where it crosses into the light area of the background. I go from a light branch to a dark branch. And that mirrors life. You'll see that. Your eye will pick up something as light over a dark background, and then it'll appear to be dark when it goes over a light background. So that's what I was doing. You'll see several of those branches just kind of venturing into the light areas, and then I treat them dark. So light is a very important element and subject in this. And again, I'm primarily going underneath those branches with some shadow. Here we're starting to detail, and I just wanted to add in some underbrush that was very textural, small in scale. That's where you see the padding. Is the padding just helps break it up when I pat with my finger. And you get a little more shadow towards the base of those clumps. That's usually what I try to do. Painting a little groupings of underbrush like this and weeds and stuff is really fun. It's just really fun. I mean, basically with the mask done, the background done, and some of the base washes on the tree, we just get into all these fun little details. I do understand people get very fearful when they get to this stage because they're afraid they will ruin it. I know the feeling. I mean, I know that emotion. I feel it too, even as an experienced painter. Here, you just are getting a close-up look at how I'm treating some of those masked off thin branches, painting out some of it and leaving a shadow on the non-light side. We're trying to kill, just the whole thing being white is just a little too stark. So coming in there and knocking some of that back. Some of that same gray mixture, indigo and dragon's blood. Dragon's blood's a very red iron oxide kind of color. Some of you may be familiar with the poem by Alfred Joyce Kilmer. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree. I don't know the whole poem, I can't recite it, but it's really great. The very ending verse is something to the effect of, any person can make a poem, but only God can make a tree. Okay, just randomly throwing that in there. I love trees are magical. Mostly here on out, you're going to see this kind of detailing of the ground. Adding texture, adding dips and rises to the ground to give it some, some dimension. This kind of thing is not possible without masks. This kind of gets back to my original introduction. Here again, branches crossing over into the light part. This was the scary part, when I was talking about detailing a piece that's coming along nicely and you don't want to mess it up. Sometimes these shadow effects, and that's what I'm doing. I'm putting on the shadow effects of the upper part of the tree, the part that is not being hit by sunlight. And I was worried because sometimes it's hard to pull off that effect. So yeah, I go through it. I understand it. You get off to a great start and you see what you have and you say, oh no, I may ruin this. When I was teaching some local classes, which I'm not doing now, but I saw this often. Like somebody did something and the watercolor just gave them a great wash. And it's like, if I do any more, I'm going to ruin it. And probably many of us, I have gone on to ruin them. That's watercolor. I mean, you just kind of have to live with it, learn from it, and try again. It's a quick and simple medium to apply. So if you don't try, you definitely won't figure out how to do it and get it right. And I had to go, as with many things, you have to go look. You have to go see, what does it look like when shadows cover part of the tree and sunlight hits the rest of the tree, or the bottom part of the tree. What does that effect look like? They tend to have the effect of wrapping around a tree. They tend to look kind of elongated, you know. They were just going to add some detail to the tree trunk itself. Carry that on up into the shadow. By this point in the painting, I was getting really excited because I felt like I was going to be able to pull it off. So once again, you know, you beginners out there are not the only ones that go through the feeling of, can I do this or will it just look kind of weird? But I just had a blast finishing out this painting, adjusting background details, filling in textural details in places on the tree and on the ground. All right, well, this is where I wrapped it up, and I was very happy with it. Very happy. Just had the mood and the light feeling that I really wanted to give it. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thank you, patrons, for your support. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.